I'm Jessica Holmes, and I'm running for Labor Commissioner. Most people only know the Labor Commissioner because her picture is in every elevator. Some refer to the current commissioner as Elevator Queen. But this job is about so much more, like fighting for safe and healthy work environments, fair wages, and equal pay for equal work. If this crisis has taught us anything, it's that workers are the backbone of our economy and deserve a champion willing to fight for them and elevate working families.
Welcome to DFOAction's second online community discussion. This time we are featuring the candidate for North Carolina Labor Commissioner, Jessica Holmes. And I just want to take a minute to say a little bit of context why we decided to do this. First of all, we know how important labor is, workers are, how important these issues are, and in particular, in light of the impact of COVID-19. And I just took a quick look. So these are unemployment insurance claims filed May 2020 is the most recent data that we have. So statewide, COVID-19 claims are more than half of the unemployment insurance claims that we have. And for me, what was striking about this data is if you can see this screen on claimants by race, you'll see that 33% of claimants are African American, whereas we live in a state that is only 22% of the population is African American. So we know that it's having a disparate racial impact, and we know that it's impacting a lot of North Carolinians. But that's just one little snapshot. I'm gonna just go back and tell you the two other reasons why we really wanted to highlight Jessica. Her candidacy, along with that of Yvonne Hawley, offers voters in this state a really historic opportunity. If you don't count judicial races, which are different for all sorts of reasons, this state has only ever elected one other African American statewide in recent times, and that was quite some time ago when we elected Ralph Campbell as state auditor. So Jessica and Yvonne Hawley together represent the first opportunity to elect an African American woman statewide to a Council of State position, and that truly is something that those of us in Durham can make a huge contribution to. So that's an important reason to be hearing from Jessica. But the third reason, if I can just take a moment to say how amazing Jessica is. I was thinking back, I've been involved with DFO since 2008, but I've known Jessica since 2006. And I have seen the incredible way that she has grown into an amazing leader who inspires people. She listens to people. She cares about their issues. She's a person of great integrity. And I want to tell you honestly that now, when I struggle with the role that I currently have as elected person, and I turn to Jessica for advice. And also, of course, for inspiration. So she is an amazing leader that we can expect great things from as Commissioner of Labor. So we have an amazing agenda for you this evening. The agenda is in the chat. So first up, our first amazing speaker is Mary B. McMillan. She is currently the president of North Carolina's state AFL-CIO. When she was elected to this position in 2017, she became the first female president in the history of the organization, and she's now one of 9 women leading state AFL-CIO federations in the country. Prior to being elected president, she served as 12 years as secretary treasurer. Again, the first woman to serve in that position. I just want to tell you, I have seen the amazing way that she electrifies audiences, that she inspires people in North Carolina, and really is in so many ways the heart and soul of the labor movement here. And she's also a poet. So with that, I will turn it over to Mary McMillan.
Thank you so much, Justice Earls, and thanks to Durham Organizing for Action for hosting this conversation tonight. You know, tonight's conversation comes at a critical moment, a moment when working people face great challenges but also have a great opportunity to make change and make our state and our country better for working people. So let's start with some of the challenges and then talk about the change that we need to create. This pandemic, it has created a world of hurt for working people. On the one hand, you have millions of workers who are unemployed and who are wondering how they're going to pay their bills and take care of their families, especially now that the federal $600 is going to run out next week, and North Carolina has some of the stingiest state unemployment benefits in the nation. So we have millions of workers who are without jobs. And then on the other hand, we have millions of workers who have been working harder than ever throughout this pandemic to take care of the sick, to make sure that we have internet and food, to deliver our mail and medication. And every day, those essential workers go to work and they worry about their safety and wonder, is this the day that I'm going to get COVID? Is this the day that I'm going to come home and infect somebody I love? We have heard from nurses and firefighters that they don't have enough PPE. We've heard about farm workers living in completely crowded conditions, manufacturing workers where social distancing isn't being enforced. These workers we call essential, yet we aren't doing what we need to do to protect them, and we certainly aren't paying them what they deserve. These workers are going to work every day, risking their lives to feed us and take care of us. It's time that we take care of them by providing hazard pay and raising the minimum wage. All workers should earn enough to provide their families with the essentials they work so hard to provide for us every day. And all workers should have a safe workplace, which brings me to our current Commissioner of Labor in the State Department, here. There is so much that they could be doing to protect workers in this pandemic. They could create an emergency infectious disease standard that would allow them to enforce CDC recommendations around social distancing and other prevention recommendations. They could inspect essential workplaces. They could create a COVID hotline to receive complaints, and they could aggressively follow up on complaints. There was recently an investigation by the Charlotte Observer that found that over 433 COVID-related complaints have been made to the State Department of Labor, and not a single complaint has resulted in a citation of an employer. We've heard from workers who filed complaints with the Department of Labor, and yet they've heard nothing back. We're left to wonder who in North Carolina is looking out for workers' safety in what could be the worst occupational safety crisis ever. Working people in North Carolina deserve better. We need more than just guidelines. We need regulations. We need standards, and we need enforcement. The State Department of Labor says they're not responsible for enforcing executive orders that call for social distancing, masks, and other things. They say that's the job of local law enforcement. They are suggesting that workers call the cops on their bosses if they feel unsafe. That is absurd, but frankly, it's not surprising given Commissioner Berry's record and our State Department of Labor's record of failing to help working people. News investigations over the years have shown that Commissioner Berry and the State Department of Labor have downplayed safety issues in the poultry industry, that their department has failed to track down deadbeat employers who have robbed workers of their hard-earned wages, and that companies that have given contributions to Commissioner Berry's campaigns have received reduced fines when they've been found in violation. And the list could go on and on of the ways that our current commissioner and our State Department of Labor has failed working people in North Carolina. But that brings me to the opportunity we have, because sisters and brothers, it does not have to be this way. Working people are fed up and they are fired up. People are organizing in the workplace and in the streets, And if we organize at the ballot box this fall, we can elect a labor commissioner who truly cares about working people, which is why the North Carolina AFL-CIO has enthusiastically endorsed Jessica Holmes for labor commissioner. We can also change our legislature so it's controlled by a pro-worker majority. And just think what we can do when that happens. We can start working on repealing the ban on public employee collective bargaining in this state. We can raise the state's minimum wage. We could pass paid sick leave and expand Medicaid, policies that if we had in place prior to the pandemic, we wouldn't see such suffering like we do now. And we could reverse the draconian cuts to unemployment benefits that the Republican majority made in 2013 and ensure that there's a safety net so that jobless workers could survive an economic crisis like this one. I know that sometimes these seem like very dark times, but a better world is possible. A world where so-called essential workers are truly treated like essential. A world where the grocery clerks, farm workers, and home health care aides are paid a living wage. A world where our Black brothers and sisters no longer have to fear for their lives. A world where our commander-in-chief actually commands respect. A world where all working people can enjoy the fruits of their labor. I hope that all of us will leave this call tonight fired up and ready to do our part to make that world a reality. I am so excited about the thought of Jessica Holmes as our next labor commissioner, and I am excited about all that we could do to make North Carolina a much better place for working people. So with that, back to you, Anita.
All right. Wow, thank you, Mary B. Yeah, definitely. Faith is a certified nursing assistant who works at Cape Fear Valley Hospital in Fayetteville. She's a member of NC Raise Up and Fight for 15 and a union. She contracted COVID-19 from a coworker in May, and she has since recovered. She's going to talk with us about the importance of workers having a seat at the table in matters of health and safety. Thank you so much, Faith, for being with us.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that. You kind of took that part away from me, so I'm okay with that. I wanted to come on and speak with all of you and tell you that, as you know, I am a CNA at a hospital here in Fayetteville, and working conditions prior to COVID were, you're always at risk. We deal with people with infectious diseases every day. We put our lives on the line every single day when we come to work. We have to deal with ESBL, VRE, MRSA, TB. Sometimes we don't even know that these people are infected with this until after we've been in contact with them. We risk our lives every day. On top of that, we bring that home to our families or to our friends. So when COVID came along, COVID made us all very nervous, even the healthcare workers. We didn't know which way to go. We didn't know what was happening. We were in fear, not only for losing our jobs, but in fear of contracting COVID. Well, I contracted COVID, and I did get it from a coworker. And I felt like I was supposed to get it because I needed to let people know that you can survive it. But it was awful. It was an awful experience. It was an awful experience. And when they tell you COVID gets in your eyes and to wear eye protection, it gets in your eyes. And I saw it firsthand, how it got in my eyes during the process of it. When I speak of COVID, I get a little choked up because it still affects me. I don't wish this on anyone, but I'm also here to speak on some of the solutions of healthcare and some of the solutions for all essential workers that we are fighting for is to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We need that. We should be getting hazard pay as essential workers. I had to use my PTO, and then I had to go in a whole PTO. I have no sick pay. They give us no sick pay. And this is one of the things that I am fighting for, is for sick pay for all essential healthcare workers, whether it be in the hospitals, whether it be the police force, whether it be a McDonald's worker, a grocery store worker, fighting for sick pay. We should not have to use our own personal PTO. We should also receive hazard pay during this time. It is very hazardous, it's very stressful. This disease is unknown to everybody. No one person is the same in contracting this. And because of this, I'm asking and come before legislation and say, hey, we need to raise this and we need to give these people hazard pay, because when they go into these hospitals and they come out, they have to come home to their families, their babies. They have families that are compromised, immunocompromised, that they have to deal with every single day. And they take a risk every day they get up and go to work just to take care of someone else. I would like to, I mentioned the sick pay for workers. I'm getting a little nervous here, but I mentioned sick pay for workers. We all need to have sick pay. Hospital workers, McDonald's workers should have sick pay. We need for North Carolina to create an essential workers health and safety council that would consist of workers from all industry that can come together and make a change, an effective change that will benefit us all, versus someone who sits behind a desk in a suit that has no clue as to what nurses do, as to what a McDonald's worker does, as to what a Walmart grocery store worker does. And they make these decisions that become harmful to us. So I'm asking for a change for that, and that's why I'm here as well. I'm reading my notes as well. I also want to try to get a union for us all. We all need a union, and without a union, it becomes difficult, especially as healthcare workers, because we are passed around like a glass of water, in all honesty. They feel like we come a dime a dozen and they can do and treat us any way they want to, because this is a right to work state. And without a union, we are kind of like stuck in a hole, and we have no rights and we have no say. So I'm here to ask for unionization for all workers, where we would have a voice, and we won't be afraid to go to work and be in fear of losing our job today. During this crisis, we have seen corporations putting profits above safety and workers. And when employers can't or won't do the right thing, we are calling on our government to step in to make sure that workers are protected. I wanted to say, I want to speak not only for our healthcare workers, but for all of us involved. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Faye, so much.
You're welcome.
Very moving to hear your personal experience. And I should have let people know you testified at a recent legislative hearing on health and safety. And if you all go to the Facing South website, you'll see that testimony there. But thank you for being willing to bear witness to what you're experiencing. So at this point, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce to all of you Thea Dowich. She is a rising senior at Duke and a political engagement project fellow at the Sanford School. She is passionate about issues involving race, poverty, and economic inequality in general, and about the criminal justice system issues specifically. And I have just been thrilled to get to know her. And thank you, Thea, for being with us this evening, and take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. As Anita said, yeah, my name is Thea Dowich, and I am a rising senior at Duke, studying statistics and public policy. I'm interested in criminal justice reform, and more particularly in the reintegration of formerly incarcerated individuals. I'm currently researching reintegration efforts in Durham and how our local government and community organizations can facilitate their reentry. So this can include providing assistance with employment opportunities, stable housing, and substance or alcohol abuse treatments. So as a young Black woman, I'm excited but also frustrated with this moment of political and cultural upheaval that we're all experiencing. I'm excited by the fact that our government officials and administrators are focusing their attention on righting the wrongs of the 400 years of institutionally sanctioned racism. but I'm also incredibly frustrated by how long this has all taken. I'm having difficult, though productive, conversations with my friends, imploring them to read scholarship on racial inequality and speak up, because the issues that are inundating their social media feeds are about me too. Silence is easy and comfortable, but the time has long passed for silence to be an acceptable response. It has been uncomfortable centering myself to make it relevant to my friends, but I'm acutely aware that if I do not and try to teach them, they may never learn. The work is taxing and emotionally draining, but it's necessary. I'm only 21, but I feel like I've been fighting the same fight for 20 years too long, so I cannot even begin to imagine the fatigue my older peers are experiencing. In addition to this fight for racial equity, we're living in the middle of a global pandemic, which is disproportionately affecting Black and brown people and jeopardizing their capacity to provide for their families. I'm searching for solutions to the problems plaguing our communities in all places, and as a student of public policy, I'm readily inclined to see the fix as an active collaboration between us and our elected officials. It is more important than ever that we elect individuals who will meet us where we stand and fight for us when we cannot. I'm also conscious of the importance of giving Black people, especially Black women, a seat at the table. So rarely do I see any representation from people who look like me in any capacity, far less in the political arena. I do not know if I myself want to be a politician, but I know that seeing Black women in office opens so many doors for my peers and me. With that being said, I am pleased to introduce you all to Jessica Holmes. Jessica was born and raised in rural Eastern North Carolina and is a first-generation graduate of UNC Chapel Hill and their law school. She has fought for working people as a labor attorney and as a Wake County commissioner by advocating for affordable housing, banning the box, and increasing the minimum wage. Jessica will be on everyone's ballots in November as a candidate for North Carolina's Commissioner of Labor. Now more than ever, do we need a labor commissioner who prioritizes the health and safety of workers and will ensure safe and working environments for everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, Jessica Holmes.
Thank you so much for that introduction. While I am not a poet like Mary B. McMillan, I do speak truth to power. And Faith, I just want to say thank you so much for your bravery, for sharing your story. And your name very much suits you, with it being Faith, because that is exactly what I believe in right now. I have faith that come this November, that at the very least, we can change the face of the Department of Labor. And in doing so, change the face of every single elevator in the state of North Carolina. Justice Earls, she said call her Anita, but Justice Earls, as she mentioned, like she literally met me as a child walking around UNC's campus, in some ways just lost. As someone who was a first generation college student, didn't always feel like I knew what I wanted out of life. She helped me decide that I wanted to be a social justice warrior. So don't let her downplay the role that she's played in my life, because even now when she walks into a room, I like straighten up a little bit, because I just adore her and respect her so much. I was actually inspired to share a message by wearing this shirt that says, "Ain't I Though?" which is inspired by Sojourner Truth's "Ain't I a Woman" speech. And unfortunately, in 2020, as a woman, we're still having to say, aren't I worthy? And as a Black woman, I'm still having to say, aren't I worthy to occupy a space that quite frankly was never meant for me to occupy? For example, it was mentioned earlier that there has never been a woman of color to serve on the North Carolina Council of State in the history of our country. But I tell you what, we are about to change the face of politics with myself, with Representative Yvonne Hawley. We also have on the statewide ballot Chief Justice Beasley, as well as Laura Cubbage running for Court of Appeals. And if we all on this call have anything to do with it, we are literally going to change the face of our government. One thing about me is I am unapologetically Black. I am unapologetically a woman. When I initially ran in 2014, I remember sitting down with party leadership and saying to them that I'm a very proud Democrat, but I'm nobody's mouthpiece and I'm nobody's token. And I have lived up to that in focusing in on serving the most vulnerable people in our community through leading on affordable housing, through leading on food insecurity. But to go backwards a bit, to tell you a little bit about my background and why I'm before you today as your labor commissioner candidate. I was born and raised in rural Eastern North Carolina.
My mom dropped out of high school in order to have me. She was a laborer. She worked at various meatpacking plants across Eastern North Carolina as the mother to 5 young children. And I would hear all of these horror stories about working in that plant. Quite frankly, many of my family members worked in meatpacking plants. And they talked about the fear of even going to the restroom. Because if you're on a sort of like an assembly line and someone is not there to do their part, things get backed up. And people were literally afraid to go to the restroom. At some point, my mom ended up getting her hand stuck in a machine, and it basically cut her hand down the middle here. And I remember being a child and going to visit her in the hospital thinking, get up. you know, we as her children, we went to visit her, but we left and she didn't. And at the time, I could not understand why my mom was stuck in a hospital bed and could not come home to her children. That story helped me better understand what type of law I wanted to practice in terms of focusing in on labor and employment law, and also ensuring access to an education for everyone across North Carolina, because I ended up being raised by my grandmother who, I don't think went beyond 5th grade in terms of her education. So I largely credit the support of teachers, good old public school educators in Pender County who told me I could go to college when it was just not something I had ever seen. I credit people like Anita who let me know that I could go to law school and actually be a lawyer and advocate for people. So I come at this not as someone who grew up wanting to be a politician. In fact, I was the furthest thing from it. And Lillian's List will tell you that oftentimes when women get asked to run for office, they have to be asked about 7 times. Well, I was probably at number 29 before I actually ended up saying yes. Because my thought was, in Wake County, for starters, there was no one on the board who looked like me. There was not another Black woman on that board. Also, the median age was about 60 years old. So I didn't see myself reflected in government. And I also told the party, who's gonna pay for this? Because I can't pay for this as a public interest attorney. And I can tell you that my parents will not be putting into any independent expenditures. They will, my family simply doesn't have the capacity to donate. But I ran on a platform of authenticity and speaking truth to power. And in 2014, I was elected as the youngest person ever elected in Wake County's history as an at-large county commissioner representing all over 1 million constituents with my trigger finger on a budget that exceeds $1 billion. And in that meantime, I'm not one of those elected officials where you have to listen to what I say, because I know all of you have heard from elected officials who say what they think you want to hear. You can judge me by the fruit of my labor. Go back and look at my vote. I voted to provide a living wage to all of Wake County government employees. I've worked with Teamsters to try to make sure that organizations that contract with the county also pay their contractors a living wage. I was the first person to bring forth paid parental leave in Wake County before the governor brought it to state employees just last year. I also brought forth paid family illness leave. This became very important to me, as I mentioned, being raised by my grandmother. More and more as baby boomers continue to age, more people in the workforce are having to become caregivers of aging parents. And as for me, aging grandparents. And so that leave, again, allows people to maintain their sick leave for themselves, but use paid family illness leave to care for an ailing child or parent or grandparent. Also, I brought Ban the Box to Wake County. I increased the number of volunteer leaves that our employees have, because I think that only makes Wake County government look good for our employees to be able to go out and build a Habitat house, or to go into their child's school and read a book or go on a field trip. One of the things I am most recently very, very proud of was just this past board meeting, I put forth 2 resolutions. One being declaring racism as a public health crisis. The reason, and quite frankly, the COVID-19 is one of the things that triggered the timing of this particular resolution. In Wake County right now, you can go to our website to verify these numbers. The Hispanic population makes up about 10% of our population in Wake County and 45% of all of the confirmed COVID cases. People of color, Black people, make up 25% of all of Wake County's confirmed COVID cases. Between Black and brown people, we make up 70% of the confirmed COVID cases in Wake County. I make it very clear, COVID-19 did not create disparities in healthcare or healthcare outcomes. To me, it only further exposed the inequities that have been here long before COVID. And we made a commitment, one, to acknowledge the disparities in healthcare and health outcomes and access, and made a commitment to do something about it. In that meantime, we have worked with organizations such as the Divine Nine, Hispanic organizations and leaders in order to do targeted mask distribution in vulnerable communities. So that, some of us can just grab our cell phones and in one click purchase a mask from Amazon, but not everybody has the ability to do that. So targeted mask distribution is just one of those things that we are doing to try to combat COVID-19 in Black and brown communities, as well as targeting testing sites in locations where people already are, free testing sites, as opposed to making them come to locations that they're not as familiar with. Also on that same agenda was designating Juneteenth as a county holiday. So on the 4th of July, I announced on my social media page that just as I enthusiastically celebrate the 4th of July, which was created in 1776 in terms of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, and that became the birth of sort of American independence, and we commemorated on the 4th of July. Well, I mentioned 1776. The Civil War didn't end until 1865. So 1776 did not represent the liberation of my people at that point in our country's history. So I put out an ask. The same way we celebrate enthusiastically the 4th of July, we should also recognize Independence Day for Black people, which is Juneteenth. Both of those proclamations passed unanimously. And at the time, I had no idea that Wake County would become the first county in North Carolina to commemorate Juneteenth as a paid county holiday. Had no idea that that was the case until after it was passed, and I started seeing tweets from NNO and WRL and so on. That's certainly not why I did it. But I'm very glad to see that there are calls all across North Carolina, from Johnson County to Mecklenburg, where people are attacking their county commissioners and saying, what's up? Are you all gonna recognize Juneteenth? And, I'm calling on county commissioners, and quite frankly, I'm calling on the state, but we know how, I'll get to them a little bit later. But, it should be not only a county holiday, but it should be a state holiday, it should be a federal holiday. And again, if we're gonna recognize our country's history, we can't just pick and choose the parts that are most convenient for us. So again, I just want to go back to the fact that, you don't have to believe what I say. Check my voting record. I come at this from a very genuine and authentic place of worker safety. If you go to work and do your job, you should be able to make ends meet. You should have access to quality health care. You should be able to come home with the same 10 fingers and 10 toes that you went to work with. My opponent has already resorted to name calling, but I actually like this one because I've been called better names by better men. So in one article, he's quoted as saying, we don't need an activist in the Department of Labor. We don't need a crusader. So he was referring to me as a crusader. Well, my thought is this: what we don't need in the Department of Justice is another Cherie Berry who is going to prioritize profits over people. And she's made it very clear about that. Check the press conferences that Governor Cooper is doing. Have you seen her at one of them? Have you heard her talking about workers or leading on workers' rights right now? No, she's been silent. And she's essentially been that for her entire time in office. There's a running joke amongst lawyers. If your company, by chance, ends up getting a fine from her office, the running joke amongst lawyers is it's not going to be the maximum extent that they could fine you. And if you appeal, you get half off. Make no mistake about it. I am not anti-business. As a county commissioner, I have worked very well with the Raleigh Chamber, have worked very well to bring hundreds, if not thousands of jobs into Wake County. What I am and what I'm going to do is better restore the balance that has been tipped for so long in favor of the employer over the employees. I don't think people have to choose between being pro-labor and pro-business. If you are a business who will abide by the laws and regulations related to worker safety, we can be friends. If you are a business that thinks it's cheaper to pay a fine than to fix equipment that could jeopardize or harm your workers, then you're probably not, I won't say probably, then you will not be my friend. And that's just what it's going to be. I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share with you all. I want to note, I'll have Ian drop the link in the chat box, but I'm having an event coming up on Sunday, July 26th, called Keeping It 100, a conversation about uplifting North Carolina's working poor. And I come at this from being a family of laborers, growing up as someone who lived the life of the working poor. So I'm not talking about this from a textbook perspective. I'm coming at this from lived experiences. The tickets to that event is $20. I would love for you all to join us or support that event if you can. One of my favorite authors, Gene Nickel, will be talking about his new book, Indecent Assembly, where he has a chapter where he talks about the North Carolina General Assembly's war on the working poor. I need you all to help me. I made history in 2014. We can make history again in November. We have the most diverse Supreme Court that our state has ever seen. You could elect the most diverse Council of State slate that this state has ever seen. I need you to help me make history. I need you to help me change the face of government. And I know candidates are always talking about money, but I tell you what, I can't win without it. Unfortunately, with Citizens United and dark money, the word is that, past June 30th, that my opponent is going to get a slew of money that we as the public will never see, because that report won't come out until after the November election. So I need you all to help me, because if you don't, I can best believe the businesses that I'm talking about, they're not gonna fill up my campaign account. There are more, I'm gonna stay true to myself. And that means I'm very much dependent on grassroots workers who, quite frankly, are hurting right now. Mary B mentioned essential workers. Well, I think essential workers along with everybody else, but I don't think they need our gratitude. They can't eat that. They can't use that to pay their bills. What they need is a living wage. Many of the essential workers that we say, oh, we're so grateful for them. Everybody wants to tweet about it and say, thank you to grocery store workers and thank you to bus drivers. But do we want to provide or put the funds forward to make sure they have PPE? The same people bagging our groceries who we are thanking, many of them are getting paid minimum wage, like my mom was when she was injured in the workplace. So let's get tired of people who pay lip service to helping workers and elect somebody who's a labor and employment law attorney who has represented workers all across the state of North Carolina. Now, I'm not sure why I'm on time, and I don't want to have Faulkner buzz me, so I will allow her and Anita to open the floor for questions, but I'm here for y'all. I'm real, and I'm grateful for you all for the opportunity to let me talk.
Well, you are right on time. So thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica, for spending time with us, for your passion. Thank you for the courage to step out there and run statewide for this crucially important office. Just enormously grateful to you. So I'm going to start by seeing if our other speakers have questions for you. Mary B. or Faith, do you have a question you want to ask Jessica?
Yeah, you know, a lot of elected officials use their position as a bully pulpit. And certainly our current commissioner has used her office as a bully pulpit, unfortunately, to advocate for deregulation. She's been one of the loudest voices during this pandemic for we got to open up everything and get people back to work. She's said she doesn't believe in the minimum wage. Mm-hmm. So how would you use this office as a bully pulpit for workers' rights, especially the right for workers to join together in unions and collectively bargain? You know, you heard Faith talk about Raise Up. You know, she and the worker leaders, they're fighting not just for 15, they're fighting for 15 in a union, because there really can be no justice until workers have the freedom to negotiate for themselves fair wages and working conditions. It's about self-determination and justice. So how would you advocate for the right to organize and collectively bargain?
Thank you for that question. I'll answer it in two parts. One, regarding the bully pulpit, and two, talking about the right to unionize. As to the bully pulpit, for starters, even as a county commissioner, I can't tell you how many times I've been told to sit down and shut up. I can also tell you the number of times that's worked. So the charge of the Department of Labor is to promote the safety, health, and general well-being of North Carolina's workers. I can't do that until the General Assembly expands Medicaid. I can't do that until we do better by workers' compensation. I can't do that with this measly and pitiful unemployment benefits. I think it was around 2013 when they shortened the number of weeks of eligibility and also reduced the maximum weekly amount that you could receive. All of those things I think are very much intertwined with the things that a commissioner of labor should be talking about. I've had people say, well, you can't vote on any of those things. And that's true. That is why I am working with like-minded folks who are running in the General Assembly to get some of that legislation passed. But I guess there's one thing that you can count on is that I will be communicating with legislators. I will be sharing best practices. I will be sharing with them as an attorney, drafts of bills that they can and should put forward. So I'm very proud to use my mouth to talk about the issues that I care about. And that's something that I have been doing on behalf of workers. I've marched with teachers down Jones Street. I've shown up in Charlotte to stand with UAW workers who were striking. And these are things that I'm going to continue to do as Commissioner of Labor. As he mentioned, I'm going to be that crusader. That is a word that I will take and that I will own, and I'm just fine with it. As to the union part, I have spent most of my legal career working for the North Carolina Association of Educators, which is the affiliate of the National Education Association. I am a card-carrying, dues-paying union member. That is something that I very much believe in. There are some people that you won't catch saying that they believe in the right to collectively bargain. I am not afraid to say that I believe in that. I am also not afraid to be honest and say that many of the laws related to labor and employment law skew on behalf of employers. That is a problem. So when it comes to, seeking the right to organize and unionize, that is an area where I have and will continue to use my voice. Every time on a questionnaire I get the opportunity, even if they don't ask me about it, I let them know, like, hey, I support collective bargaining. I'm not afraid of the word. And I really just don't see the harm in letting people communicate collectively what their needs and their concerns are. That's my best answer to that question. I'm a card-carrying union member and support other workers having the right to do the same, and will certainly open up the doors to to my building and to my employees as Commissioner of Labor if they'd like to be a member of Scenic or any other organization that they choose that will help them uplift their voices.
What do you anticipate being the most difficult part of your new position, and how do you see yourself overcoming this challenge?
I would say the number one most difficult issue is going to be the law. As I mentioned, the laws are skewed in favor of employers in North Carolina. But the first thing in tackling that is to actually do my job and enforce workers' rights to the fullest extent of the law. That is something that is not currently being done. We are also in a state that says that they care about workers, but our investments certainly don't speak to that. Like, for example, with the General Assembly has been in and out of session for weeks, and there's no hazard pay bill for workers. You know, everybody wants to tweet, thank a worker. Workers can't eat your thanks, can't pay bills with your thanks. So I would be, of course, going up against the grain. And also something I've been warned about is you have a Department of Labor, you have employees, some of whom have been under Miss Berry's administration for the full time that she's been there for 20 years. And now they are going to actually have to do their jobs. And they are going to have to aggressively respond to wage complaints. They are going to have to get off their butts and actually go and conduct inspections. And so when you've got this 5'3" Black woman rolling up in this office that's been under Republican leadership for the past 20 years, I expect that there are going to be some people that don't appreciate my effort to restore the balance in that office that I think has been missing. And quite frankly, when you're a 5'3" Black woman and the youngest person in the room, and you're in a leadership position, that in and of itself is a challenge, but it's a challenge that I'm used to. Wake County government, we have about 4,200 employees. The Department of Labor has under 400. So I'm ready for those challenges. And I also, as Anita mentioned, when she wants to talk, she calls me. And so there might be a few late night phone calls to people like Anita. I might say some words my grandma might not appreciate, but I have fallen on my butt a couple times as an elected official, as a county commissioner, sometimes very publicly so. But one of my favorite songs talks about getting up and the fact that she would do it 100 times over again. So if I don't get something right the first time, or if I'm learning in the position and I fall on my behind, one thing that you can best believe and that you can count on is that I'm going to get up again, and I'm going to go into that department the next day, and I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. But what you'll get is passion in somebody that has a heart for the job, who just is probably annoying to a lot of my opponents and people that don't agree with me, because I just don't give up. I've been through too much and accomplished too much and overcome too much to just be the legislator's punk or anybody else's. And so that's how I'm going into this.
I have a question for Jessica. The role of the Council of State, you mentioned it as well. For the layperson, can you share what you think are the some critical elements about being a member of the Council of State in the role of being Commissioner of Labor that would also be important for us to know?
Well, for starters, with the Council of State, there are, you can essentially call us department heads. And we work collectively with the governor. For example, there is the Department of Public Instruction. There is the Department of Agriculture. There's the State Treasurer, the Insurance Commissioner, Secretary of State, State Auditor, the Lieutenant Governor, as well as the Attorney General. And of course, the governor's office. We make up the Council of State. So as I mentioned earlier, I am supposed to be, the representative on that board who advocates for workers. And this is not just me making it up, per statute, this position is supposed to promote the safety, health and general well-being of the state's workers. So that is the voice that I will bring to that table. As I mentioned, when the governor's doing press conferences and he's talking about the Department of Public Instruction, oftentimes you will see the person in that role standing next to him. When he's talking about workers right now, Ms. Berry is a no-show. So what I would bring to that table is the perspective of how do we as a council of state guide policies that benefit North Carolina's working families. And, and everyone else on that council of state would bring their own perspective in terms of focusing in on, for example, with the Department of Agriculture, North Carolina's agricultural state. So, she's going to be bringing a perspective of talking about farms and addressing food insecurity and ensuring safety on those farms, which is something that I'd also be working with her on. There's a lot of intersectionality in those roles. One of the people I'm looking forward to working with most, I'm hoping to be the state's new superintendent, which I hope to be Jen Mangum, just saying. One of my dreams when it comes to workforce development, by the way, I see education as workforce development. So I have served on the Wake County Smart Start Board of Directors since 2014. I believe in pre-K, strong K through 12, but in Wake County, I've had the pleasure to work with Wake Tech very closely. What I would like to do in conjunction with the state superintendent is put more hands-on courses back in high schools. For those kids who might not be on a 4-year track, I want them to be able to get certification or start getting certifications in high schools, working with our local community colleges. For example, in Wake County, we have these career tech high schools that are focused such that you can start getting your certification to do hair while you're in high school. We can do a better job of getting students hands-on internships while still in high school. I see that as workforce development, but I'm going to need the support and the collaboration of the state superintendent in order to do that. When it comes to the Department of Agriculture, I'm looking forward to working with Jenna Wadsworth to address the safety of workers on farms. My job is to inspect those farms. And also, when it comes to farm workers, there's usually an issue, not usually, but sometimes an issue with wages. Because of someone's immigration status, they may have told them they were going to pay them minimum wage, but they get their check and it's at $5 an hour. So, addressing, and also when it comes to things like migrant housing, which is just awful, by the way, in many of our farms across the state, those are things I'm going to work with the Department of Agriculture on to ensure that farms are safe for workers. And same thing when it comes to pensions with the the state treasurer. It is very important to me that when people work and work for 30 years, that their pensions are intact and that the state fully funds pension systems, and that falls under the Department of the state treasurer. So all of these positions are very much intertwined and we're all dependent on each other. That is why it's not just important to elect me to the Council of State, but it's also important to elect like-minded people who believe in things like fully funding the pension system, who believe in a partnership with me to make sure that kids graduate from neighborhoods like I grew up with, a start on getting a trade.
That's very thorough. A lot of the items that you mentioned touch everybody's lives, ticked off several things that you mentioned. Thank you for that. There's some very innovative and creative ideas there that's sorely needed. We had a question, wanted a little bit more information about your mom and when your mom had her occupational accident. What age were you when that happened?
I was probably 7 or 8 years old at the time. And again, back then I didn't understand that she worked on a sort of assembly line at a meatpacking plant. Like I didn't understand, I remember hearing the adults talk about like things like challenges, like going to the restroom, but I didn't until many, many years later appreciate the fact that that hand injury And the fact that you're talking about a woman who did not have a GED. She didn't get her GED until around the time that I was going to college. And she said me getting my education inspired her to get her GED. So, like I said, as a child, I didn't understand what was happening. And as I went through law school, I started to understand how I could use my legal degree to help other people, and started having a better understanding of workers' rights, or the lack thereof, in North Carolina. And again, want to better restore that balance. Quite frankly, from that point on, it made it difficult for my mom to work, because that was her dominant hand. And while she signed an agreement to, sort of a non-disclosure agreement, basically she got $1,000 and was told to go on about her business, which impacted the way that I grew up. And as I mentioned, ended up being raised by my grandmother, because she didn't have the ability to provide stable housing, and didn't always have the ability to provide stable food in the house. And so that one incident literally changed the course of my life, and it was many years before I understood how I as an individual could do something about it, if that makes any sense. So I didn't necessarily get into become a county commissioner so I could use that as a stepping stone to something else. But again, over time, as I start to realize, what the problems are and who is responsible for addressing those problems. And I looked up at the Department of Labor like, this is your job and you're not doing it. Mm-hmm. Since you don't want it, I'll take it and I'll do your job.
All right.
But I do want to take this moment to just thank our amazing group of women who came tonight to speak with us and share their time with us. And so a huge thank you. Everyone should stay tuned. DFO will be having an event in August. You can sign up on our website. You'll get emails. It's on our Facebook page. But thank you to our incredible panelists.
Jessica, I'm wondering how you see what's been going on since May 25th. I was on a call, I teach at Duke, and I was on a call where one of my colleagues said, when we come back in the fall, our students are going to know that they can change the world. And they might not have known that in this past semester. And so I'm wondering, maybe what kind of inspiration do you take? There's so much suffering right now as well, but I think there's also so much hope. So I'm just wondering what you see when you look back about the protests that's been going on since May 25th.
For starters, I'll note that I'm an adjunct at NC State. So, I love engaging my students and challenging them. I also have marched and marched down Fayetteville Street along with protesters. I have also shown up downtown the day after several buildings were damaged with a broom and a dustpan and trash bags. So I very much believe in allowing collective voices to be heard. In terms of students, one of the things that I have learned over time is fear is the biggest thing that blocks us from speaking out or speaking our truth. And I'll give you an example. So when I initially ran for office, and I was trying to explain to people why I cared so much about issues. And I remember going to my mom and saying, are you comfortable with me sharing this part of my childhood? Are you comfortable with this? And, quite frankly, sometimes I didn't want to share because I was embarrassed. Sometimes I didn't want to share because I was afraid of how people would take it. And even sometimes at the board table early on, I was afraid to, if I'm being honest, talk about issues that challenged my white male colleagues. When I ran in 2014, it was me and 7 white men. That's how I spent my year running. So when it comes to students, One of my favorite quotes is, "There's nothing to fear but fear itself." Be fearless, be unapologetic. Tell people who you are. I find that just being honest is so much better than me coming to you all and reading off of a script, or me saying what I think you want to hear. You know, I am who I am, I believe what I believe, and many of my beliefs are due to my background and my lived experiences. And so to the students, I challenge them to live out their truth, whatever that is. And I always challenge my students to find their motivation. You know, I teach students in the MSW program. So, you know, they're going to be social workers. So oftentimes I find that they have a reason that they have come into this work. And I try to pull that reason out of them. Like if they, in their childhood, went through something, I can often tie that to what they want to be. And I tell them, you know, when it gets hard, and when you cry yourself to sleep for a child because you know they're going through something, and you just had to drop them back off at a household that you don't think is safe for them, you know, it's going to be that inner core that makes you get up and do it again the next day. Like, that's why it's so important to do work based on your truth and based on your passions. I'm not quite sure if that makes sense, but I think of it as, when I talk to my students, I talk to them about having a purpose-driven life. Like, have a purpose-driven career, because then you won't get tired of it. You might get tired of it, but you'll get up the next day and you'll keep doing it again, because you're not just there for the paycheck. And that's an easy message for me to convey to social workers, to students wanting to be social workers, because they're already so passion-driven. But, you know, finding your core and getting over your fears, and, you know, being able to relate to the people that you serve by being honest with your story, goes a long way when you're working in things like child welfare and human services. Suzanne, I think I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you so much, Jessica, for your speech.
I like your sign in the background.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I thank you so much for translating your personal experience into the cause of helping all workers. Your speech today was absolutely wonderful, and I believe in your campaign. I wanted to add a small comment, because I am so happy that you have spoken up about undocumented workers. I once was going to my regular grocery store, and I decided to give some money to a family that was begging, and then I actually stopped and asked them what was going on in their lives. And the young man, he was there with his wife and little baby. He said that he doesn't have documentation yet, and he will go to try to find work, like construction work, and it'll be very hard labor. And he's promised a certain wage at the beginning of the week. And at the end of the week on Friday, the person gives him $100.
Yep.
And he cannot live on that. And it was just very, very hard to hear that face to face, but I know that's the reality for so many people. And we make laws that people that are undocumented get hurt or put in jail, or their kids put in cages, or even just in normal times, they're exposed to pesticide. And yet we don't find the employers, specifically our nation does not find the employers for hiring undocumented workers. We hurt the most impoverished undocumented workers. So we need to just be aware of that. And I just wanted to make that comment, and I really appreciated you saying your comment, Jessica, and all that you will do, and we need to get you in office.
Amen to the getting me in office part. One thing that you said that triggered a comment is when you talked about farms and pesticides. Child labor laws in North Carolina. Imagine a child who, you know, from early on in their life works on a farm on land that's treated with chemicals. Mm-hmm. That child is more likely to have health issues, is more likely to get cancer, and so on. And there are some restrictions that apply to adults that do not apply to children working on farms. And therefore, you will have higher instances of those children getting injured on those farms than even adults. I'm glad that you brought up the fact that this construction worker was getting paid the $100 because I mentioned it in the context of farms, but you're right. It doesn't just happen on farms. It also happens on construction sites. I know of places where people who are undocumented gather and someone literally comes and they jump on the back of a truck and they go to work and may or may not get paid a fair wage. And they feel there's nothing they can do about it. Who are they going to report it to? They're going to be afraid that if they speak up, one, that they won't get a chance to get the little bit of money they were getting, and two, that they're going to be reported. So there are lots of industries across North Carolina who use this labor, and then they're not getting paid fair wages, they're not getting health care benefits, and they're treated poorly. And so thank you for elaborating on that and making sure people understood this isn't isolated to one industry. You would be surprised. And in fact, I want to say within the past year or so in Durham, there was a success where workers were able to go up against their employer and recover their wages. I can't remember the group, but even just right there in Durham in the past year or so, there was a group that recovered their wages to the tune of about 97%. I couldn't understand, one, why they didn't recover 100%, and also why there wasn't interest in an employer that held on to their wages for months, if not up to a year on end. They had to expend their time and energy and effort to convince that employer to pay them for wages that they had already worked, and still didn't get 100%, let alone any interest on top of that. So it happens. North Carolina, I was born and raised here. I love this state, but we have a lot of dirty little secrets when it comes to how we treat people and how we treat workers, and by treating workers poorly, not only are you impacting them. When my mom's hand got caught up in that machine, it impacted myself and my 4 younger siblings. So when you classify someone as an independent contractor and you pay them less and you don't give them benefits and their child gets sick, that's a problem. So there's a domino effect when you don't treat workers right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we have one more question, and we'll end with this one. There was mention earlier about a pay increase for essential workers. Is there anything being done to pursue this? Any specifics that you can provide if you know about it?
There is nothing that will legitimately pass that is being talked about in the North Carolina General Assembly. It's just not. There are bills that have been put forward. In fact, some of which have been put forward by you all's very own Zach Hawkins, who has put forth bills related to workers' rights, and they go to a committee to die. Most of those bills don't even make it to the floor. And so, again, the majority in the General Assembly takes a thank you for your work approach to addressing essential workers.
All right, Anita, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, well, I just, if I can, just want to say 2 quick things about, the question came up about Council of State and why does it matter? And I think, as you can tell, the Council of State are actually in leadership roles on these issues with legislation as well as with the governor's policy. So they impact, 2 branches of government at the very least, but they also, you may have noticed in Dan Forest's lawsuit about COVID-19, he's complaining that the governor didn't get authority that he should have gotten from the Council of State. There are actually a number of laws that require the governor to confer with the Council of State. I'm not taking a position on Dan Forest's lawsuit. I'm just telling you as a matter of public information. The Council of State has a really important policy role in some big issues that impact all of us across the state. And I thank you all for spending this time with us. Huge thank you to our panelists, and Jessica, you're amazing. We are so excited you're running, and DFOAction will be in touch. Thanks.
Thank you all. I appreciate it so much. Like, this means a lot. I can't get out and meet you and high five you and give you hugs, but just know that I appreciate you all giving me the opportunity. It's tough to campaign during COVID because one of my strengths is getting out and meeting people, and that has been taken away from me. So opportunities like this are just absolutely like necessary. And I need you all to spread the word. You know, some people don't like it when people talk about them. Talk about me. Tell your mama, tell your cousins, tell your neighbors. When I get yard signs, I'm going to need you all to get them in your yards. And so talk about me. Bring me up. Make sure people know that there's a 5-3 firecracker that's on the ballot in November.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. And thank you all so much. Thanks, everyone, for being here.